Maneva na say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there osia dem yopo.
Exercise his power through law, apartheid law. Does that justify apartheid? It doesn't. In the same way that the law which justified the transatlantic slave trade cannot be accepted by we the victims as lawful. And we know where that law came from. That law came from the Catholic Church. That law came from the U.S. Supreme Court. And we cannot accept that as lawful. The other argument which they make, which just kills me, and sometimes since this resolution was passed, I've heard even lawyers make that argument. And I'm wondering, are these lawyers making this argument? They say that, look, the resolution establishes a hierarchy of laws. And because it establishes a hierarchy of laws, it cannot be accepted. The American delegate made that argument. The delegates of the European Union made that argument. But Senna, it's one of the most useless arguments which has ever been made. Every law establishes a hierarchy. Ghana here, in Ghana, is to be mischievous, is to be dishonest, and is to display the highest level of illiteracy. Can't believe it. But they were making this dressed nicely in suit and tie, pretending to be representatives of civilized countries. And they were making this argument in the UN General Assembly. Okay? Now, Sana, then there is this other argument, and this argument simply just kills me. The argument that the African was complicit, that we sold our own people into slavery. Where is it coming from? Where are the facts? Look, the minimum estimate I have seen is that 12.6 million Africans were enslaved, shipped out of the continent and enslaved. Okay. But for every one African who was enslaved, 3 others were killed. How were they killed? They were killed because there were wars of resistance. Our people resisted slavery. We fought against it. Check the history of Dagbon. Check the history. Samora and Babatu and so on. Go and check the historical record. We fought against slavery. We died in the millions. More than 50 million Africans died fighting against the transatlantic slave trade. That is on the continent. On the slave ships, the resistance continued. We fought. Even when we arrived on the plantations, we continued to fight. That is how Toussaint Louverture, the founder of modern Haiti, became an African hero. Toussaint Louverture was a slave. He had no education. He educated himself. He mastered weaponry. He ran away from the slave plantation and organized to free other slaves, took them to the mountains, and established the modern Republic of Haiti. The modern Republic of Haiti was established as a result of the resistance of the African people to the transatlantic slave trade. So if you don't know history, shut up. Don't waste our time. Look, my brother, if you go to Europe today, if you go to the European museums today, some of the things on display are the heads of Africans, heads. heads which were cut by the colonial armies, by the enslaving armies. Whose heads are those on display? They are the heads of our heroes who resisted the transatlantic slave trade. They are the heads of our heroes who took up weapons and fought against the transatlantic slave trade. Those are the heads on display in the European museums today. They are not the heads of those who collaborated with them. They are the heads of those who fought them and so on. Yes, it is true that there were some Africans who served as guides. They didn't know the interior and so on. But those Africans themselves were victims. They were victims. They were not collaborators. They were victims. And that is why the benefit of the transatlantic slave trade is not in Africa, it is in Europe. If they were collaborators, they should have also benefited. Where are the benefits of the transatlantic slave trade in Africa today? Show me! Show me where the benefits are. So they were not collaborators, they were victims. In any case, we should ask the important question, very important question, which is that, look, which country in the world did not undergo slavery at some point in its development? You see, people don't learn. They don't read. They don't try to understand history. And they wake up and they talk nonsense. You see, I see history as a science. I'm a Marxist. I see history as a science. And there are two ways of understanding current society and visualizing future society. One of the ways is historical materialism, and then dialectical materialism. These are the two sciences who provides us with the guide. Now, Senna, every society in the world, European, Asian, Caribbean, African, whatever, started as a primitive communal society. None of us can escape that. We have our origins in the primitive communal society. If you go to secondary school, you are told that that is the era of hunter-gatherers. The era of the hunter-gatherer is the primitive communal society. Mas, are you listening? From there was a transition to the slave state. So all of us, Europeans, Africans, Asians, whatever, went through the slave state, where some owned others as a means of production and so on. So nobody escaped that. Now, that slave state in which we went does not justify the transatlantic slave trade. You understand? It was a socio-economic formation which emerged in our development. It doesn't justify the transatlantic slave trade. Of course, from the era of slavery, there was then the transition to the feudalist system, the feudalist era. And capitalism developed out of the feudalist era. And we believe that socialism would emerge out of the capitalist era. These are stages of development that every society has gone through. So to say that Africa had slaves and therefore Africa has no right to make any claims out of the transatlantic slave trade and so on is to display a level of ignorance which is monumental. A level of ignorance which is monumental. You don't even understand the stages of development that every society in the world has had to go through. You think it is Africa. Shame on you. Ignorance. Display of bloody ignorance. Unbelievable ignorance. You understand?
Maybe they are deliberate.
Well, but if you want to portray yourself deliberately as an ignorant person, then there's something wrong with you. How can we describe you beyond seeing you as a fool? You understand? But this is the reality. Yesterday, no, 2 days ago, I heard one of my colleagues in the media. What? Why would you give a microphone to such an ignorant person to poison our population? And you know what he was saying? That, oh, Africans, we had our own slaves. We used to call them Donko. The Ghans called them Udonko, and some people called them Donko, and so on. So these white people came, and they said they wanted slaves. And we willingly sold our Udonkos to them. This bloody, ignorant fool. Look, does not even know that there were wars, that the slaves were captured in wars, that there was massive armed resistance. He doesn't know. Doesn't know. And he proudly takes a microphone and stands in front of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah's Ghana, and spews rubbish. Unbelievable. He doesn't know that there were wars of resistance. And I picked up the phone and I called him. I said, my friend, the right of free expression is there. We have to respect it and so on. But people like you are a danger to our society because you don't help us to progress. You kill us with your ignorance. You know, and you present your ignorance to us in style. You present your poison to us in suits and so on. Unbelievable. Sana. Then there are those who argue. Oh, and I am fascinated by this level of stupidity. Those who argue that our African leaders, they are very corrupt too. They are so corrupt that if you go and collect reparation and you give it to them, they will chop it. First of all, there's the admission that the reparation is there. It's not in the hands of our African leaders. Okay, it's somewhere. Why the reparation is today that we are going to collect? Are the people not corrupt? Is corruption an African phenomenon? Are we now saying that only Africans can be corrupt? I remember when there was an audit into the British parliamentary system, and I'm sure some of you would remember, and they found that the lords sitting in the House of Lords, some of them, were stealing the British taxpayers' money to buy pornographic materials. Yeah. Are they not corrupt? Is corruption an African thing? So as for African leaders, they are so corrupt that you shouldn't give them reparation money, they will chop it. But European leaders, they are not corrupt, so they can keep our money which they have stolen and use it for their development so that we don't develop. What logic is this? What stupidity is this? I can't believe it. And Africans are making this argument. Let us agree our leaders are corrupt. European leaders are also corrupt. Let the money come so that African corrupt leaders will chop it. It is better for African corrupt leaders to chop the money than European corrupt leaders to chop the money. So even if you agree that African leaders are corrupt, let them chop our money. What is this argument? Where is it coming from? Such a stupid argument. And it is made with smiles. People make it with smiles and so on. Why? European leaders, are they not corrupt? But they are keeping the money. And you are happy with them keeping the money. But when the money comes to Africa, you are worried. You see, and Senna, these things, they are not new. They are old. The people taking these positions, look at their history, look at their background, and you begin to understand. I remember that after independence, Kwame Nkrumah decided to change the national currency to the cedi. First of all to the Ghana pound, and then eventually to the cedi and so on. The old money we were using, the British pound, had the head of state of the United Kingdom on it. The Queen's head was on the currency. So Ghana decided that we will put our head of state's head on our currency. They said, what? Dictatorship. We won't agree. But when the Queen's head was on the currency, it was not dictatorship. It was okay. It was democracy. As soon as you change the Queen's head to Kwame Nkrumah's head, it becomes a dictatorship. They are the same people making these arguments today. Sana Alai, are they not the same people making these arguments today? They have a history. They are being consistent. But you see, they forget. They've been left behind. Africa is moving forward. The Caribbean is moving forward. Asia is moving forward. We've left them behind. Their history. And they have chosen to be forgotten, to remain in the past. We will move forward. This is a resolution which was passed by 123 countries. You want to step on it? It doesn't mean the majority of countries in the world, overwhelming majority of countries in the world, voted for it. Those who abstained did not even feel the moral courage to oppose. They couldn't oppose. They knew that they couldn't oppose. They had to abstain. Yes. So even the 53 that abstained, they didn't have the courage to look us in the face and say, we disagree. They were hiding. They were running.
Silence means consent.
And you, Ghanaian politician, Ghanaian intellectual, you come brazenly and say it was wrong. You are worse than the colonialists. You are worse than the perpetrator of the transatlantic slave trade. You are scum. You are the scum of the earth. That is what you are. You are the scum of the earth. Why? You did not deserve anything. You sold your soul. Before the resolution was passed, the Reverend Al Sharpton, I'm sure you all saw him, the African-American priest, he made a speech, a very passionate speech, in which he said, if you are an African or a person of African descent and you oppose this resolution, you are selling your soul. You are not worth anything. That's Reverend Al Sharpton. Not me, Reverend Al Sharpton. He said that in the chambers of the UN. And we didn't listen to him. And we are still so stupid and ignorant that we are taking these positions because we don't like Mahama. Or because we want a visa to visit New York. I pity them. Look, today, if you compare Shanghai in China to New York, you won't spend your money going to New York. If it's about luxury, if it's about style, if it's about enjoyment, if it's about modernity in transportation and so on, it is not New York. It is Shanghai. So those who are doing this because they want visas to New York and so on, they've lost it. And they've lost it completely. They don't even know the world as it is today. Then, Senna, there's this other argument. I hope we have enough time. There's this other argument. Those who reduce all of this to the payment of monetary compensation. Reparation is not about monetary compensation. It is far bigger than that. And Senna, listen to me well. No amount of money can pay for the crimes which were committed against the African people. No amount of money. Okay? So to reduce reparation to the payment of money is to undermine the African dignity and so on. No amount of money. The essence of reparation is to reset the world. Reset the world. Okay? And why do we have to reset the world? In 1945, when the United Nations was being created as an instrument or a forum for the prevention of future war, and to institute a rule-based world order in which the dignity of the human being, wherever he is, will be respected and so on, we were not at the table. We were not there. Because we were colonies. We were not there. 1945, we were not there. So they built this United Nations structure, which does not give us any meaningful voice. Africa has a population of 1.4 billion people. We don't have a veto. 1.4 billion people don't have a veto. Britain has a veto. Britain has a veto. Can you imagine it? Britain, France has a veto. Can you imagine it? So they built the United Nations organization to our detriment. The agencies of the UN, including the World Trade Organization, the IMF and the World Bank and so on, were not built to facilitate African development and advancement. It was built to maintain our position as colonies in all its essence and so on. So we need to reset the world. We need to break down these institutions and build new ones in their place, which will reflect our African dignity, which would ensure that the African people have a voice. This is reparation. Okay? This is reparation. This is an aspect of reparation. I spoke about the destruction of African spirituality. We need to build new institutions. We need to build museums. We need to develop new curriculum for the study of history and so on. This is resetting. This is reparation. Okay? Now, these things cannot be done without funding. They cannot be done without funding. We have to find the resources from somewhere in order to make these things happen. And we are saying that we have money sitting in the banks in Europe. That money belongs to us. That money was the money which was accumulated through the labor of our people. That is surplus which was generated through the labor of our people. We are entitled to it. We are demanding it. We want to take it in order to restructure the world. That is what reparation is about. Reparation is about reconstructing world history from the very beginning. Reconstructing world history to reflect the fact that the art of bathing with soap was introduced to Europe by Africans. You understand? To reflect the fact that there were African monarchs who ruled in Europe and so on, which is missing in our history. To reflect the fact that at some point in history, the richest monarch in the world was Mansa Musa from Africa. To reflect the fact that when Don Diego de Zambuja landed at the port of Elmina, in his own manual, he wrote that Elmina had the most advanced gold mining enterprise in the world. These are the words of Don Diego de Zambuja. It must be taught in our schools. It must be reflected in the story about the world and so on. The story told by Don Diego de Zambuja must be told. You don't know it, and you feel entitled to spew rubbish and ignorance on our people. No. No. Reparation is about us. Look, and I'm happy my brother is here. My brother is more politically active than I am. You know, he's actually in the thick of things. This whole debate about the introduction of homosexuality or whatever in our educational curriculum, where is it coming from? It is partly because we have lost control over the development of our curriculum. And we are taking instructions from outside. So we teach what they tell us to teach. It became a big issue under MPP, okay? Today, MPP members of parliament are raising the same issue about the Mahama government, saying that, oh, it hasn't changed, the Mahama government is still implementing the same thing and so on. Are we not worried about the fact that educational curriculum is dictated from outside? Are we not worried? Then, Sana, let me say this one. There are those who say that, look, Africa is a beneficiary of aid. How are we complaining? These are the people who have been giving us aid. You've heard that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So why do you fight with them when they've been giving you aid and so on? Their own institutions have carried out studies which show that every dollar they bring here, they take out 3 in exchange. Is that it? They themselves describe their aid as their foreign policy instruments.
PENDREAM TV now so far so good. Say open online portal e wo Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.